It's fine. It's fine. Keep juggling. Keep juggling. That's what it's about, right?
Yeah. So, just the thing with the Apple II Plus and moving forward from that period, and you mentioned DevOps.
Yeah.
Every technology that I've seen in my lifetime goes through pendulums of the swing from client server to rich clients and desktop apps and back to thin clients. We've also seen this when we started out. Hardware and software folks were the same people, right? You had to be a hardware engineer to do any software engineering. And is that your?
No, that was that.
Oh, sorry. And then gradually the hardware got smart enough that you could get away from it and you could do software engineering. But then the software got complicated enough that you had to take advantage of being clever with hardware again. And so the separation of development and ops has gone back and forth. So DevOps is something old that's come back as opposed to really something new.
Yeah.
And people say the same thing about cloud. They say, well, this is time sharing come back again. The idea of owning your own hardware or sharing hardware as a pooled resource versus having hardware dedicated to single applications. We've seen that swing back and forth too. Digital cameras down back to smartphones again. Are smartphones really an okay camera or not? So that pendulum is all over this space, especially when you talk about software for infrastructure as a service. We can't sell software to anyone who's not buying hardware. But a lot of the opinion about what hardware is required is dictated by the software. And that's why everyone who's pushing an OpenStack distribution is doing so with a reference architecture in mind. So we have a really strong belief in the right way to deploy OpenStack, the right architecture that captures what you're trying to get out of cloud, which is all this efficiency and all this agility, less waste. The irony for me is watching hardware vendors jump in on cloud buzzwords and try and use the term cloud to sell expensive custom hardware again. Yeah. Instead of capturing, this is about commodity, this is about a single class of servers. This is about
it's definitely the divide.
Yeah.
Enterprise cloud computing versus AWS or the commodities built cloud infrastructure. Yeah.
But you sort of tend to end up losing that even on the commodity side with the cloud vendors that are trying to push storage NASs or SANs for the storage backend for the virtualization layer.
You see vBlock, right? You see a lot of these, cloud in a box for the enterprise. They're not building it the way cloud is built. They're not doing what AWS does. They're not even doing what maybe Google or Twitter do. They're saying, we treat storage as one set of hardware with one set of administrators, and you have to provision LUNs and manage this as a pool. And then we have compute separate over here, different set of servers, and a bunch of control nodes. And we do high availability in a traditional way, failover and a lot of expensive RAID gear. And you've missed the boat, right? The point of cloud was you shouldn't care what piece of hardware your workload is on. Even in a private cloud environment, you should be able to audit that. But you shouldn't care as an administrator or as an end user.
Assuming you can get consistent performance out of your cloud.
SLAs, right.
So one of the things you do notice, though, with VMware in particular is they have just such a huge following. And, when you talk to customers, and they love VMware for their server consolidation.
Yes and no. People love VMware the same way they loved Microsoft. Right? They love it because it filled this huge void. There was this giant need for something that addressed that hole in the market. But if you talk to larger enterprises that have gotten past the 15 to 20 to 30% virtualized, they don't love VMware anymore. They're writing a bigger check to VMware every year than they used to write to Microsoft. And they're starting to realize that there's no one they can buy that from other than VMware, which means VMware can do whatever they want with the pricing model whenever they want for the next 2 decades.
Yes.
And this happened with vSphere 5. And it's happening with vCloud Director. And it's happening when they start looking, everyone wants to get to hybrid cloud nirvana. They want to own the base and lease the burst, and they want to go back and forth between their data center and someone else's data center. But when VMware owns both sides of that equation, you don't even know what the costs are that are being charged to all the service providers on the other side, the public cloud side. And so VMware, super support. It's built into the management console who you can burst to, which are the folks that are paying VMware an appropriate amount of money to be categorized in that list. You contrast that to OpenStack, and you're really seeing this is the Linux story to where Microsoft was in the 90s, late 90s, where all of a sudden people say, okay, well, yeah, it's Linux, it's totally different, but there are a dozen vendors that we can buy this from. There are some well-defined standards around it, and we can come and go. We can actually develop in-house capability. We're not beholden to a single vendor forever. And I think that captures a lot of the promise of commodity and the promise of cloud. It's an interesting challenge. It makes it really easy to talk about OpenStack. You know, this is the open source version of the VMware equation.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, the other thing is VMware is very weak in storage. You know, and if you look at the ownership of VMware by EMC, and a lot of people say, oh, well, they're run as totally separate businesses. Sure they are, but the day that VMware gets serious about object storage or about distributed block storage, I think EMC is going to be somewhat unhappy.
The day VMware gets serious about
distributed block storage or object storage, capabilities OpenStack has already got and that we've improved upon substantially in Piston Enterprise OS.